Okay, welcome everybody. So lovely to be with you again on a Sunday, discussing the issues which are affecting our community in conversation with heroes in our community, in our country, across the world, to really get a good perspective of what's happening in our country, our community, and the world, and also to get vital insights. We have a packed lineup today, and I'm going to go straight into it. I want to talk to Loren Raize, who heads the CSO Medical in Cape Town, to give us a bit of a perspective. And CSO Medical in Cape Town is doing the most unbelievable support work for members of our community who have contracted COVID, and are really giving them the medical support, the emotional support to be able to get through this crisis. Loren, can you maybe give us a report from the front lines of what's happening in Cape Town with our community? What is the situation at the moment? How's the community managing? And Yasher Koach, well done to you and your whole team for the unbelievable work which me and my family experienced firsthand when you supported us through the whole experience. So we want to thank you on a personal note, and well done for everything you're doing in the community for the holy work. So Loren, give us a bit of an update. Where are things holding in Cape Town?
Thank you, Rabbi, and to the other panelists, hello. Thank you so much for having us again after last week's mess up, and my apologies for that. I'll go straight into it so as not to take up too much of your time. The community cases in Cape Town, this is what we look like. You can see that we had December numbers really peaked at around just over the 400 mark. We had a drastic decrease in January. However, we can report the same as Hatzola and pretty much what's going on nationwide. These numbers in January were still double the numbers that we saw in the first wave. Thankfully, we are seeing less and less new cases, but the CSO Cape Town still urges people to be extra vigilant and cautious. Last week, Dr. Richard Friedland mentioned a third wave round about May, June, which is something that we are taking very seriously and that we are preparing for. Our wellness monitoring program, which was given to us with thanks to Hatzola, these are the numbers that we've seen so far. We've had a total of 747 cases, of which currently we have only 50 cases active. Our recovery rate sits at around 96.3%, and we have a fatality rate of 3.6%. I wish to take this time to wish all of those who've lost loved ones during this pandemic a long life and send them strength during this very difficult time. Having said that, Rabbi, you asked for a report back on our community. I think it's been a very difficult time in all of our respective communities. And I wish to highlight that for anybody struggling at this time, there are in Cape Town 2 places that one can reach out to. JCS, which is just an incredible organization, and they are doing the work of angels in reaching out and helping those in need. Their workload has certainly increased. And then Viv Anstey and Adrian Jacobson and their team, who've got a community mental health line that's been set up. And that number is on the screen for anybody who is struggling and having a hard time and, feels the need to reach out to someone. And then, Rabbi, you started off this call talking about heroes. And I have to say that at CSO, we have dedicated angels and heroes. And I thought I would take this opportunity, not only just to give you a reflection of December 2020 for us in numbers, which I think some of those numbers are quite staggering, but also just to say thank you to the people behind these numbers. These people make up a large part of the heroes and angels who work or volunteer at CSO Cape Town. And I would like for them to be recognized today on this platform, just as a thank you for all of their hard work and their dedication. To our medics that are putting their lives on the line at this time, going out to see COVID patients. Most of them are volunteers, and I think it's amazing work that they're doing. And then lastly, just if anybody that's out there in our community perhaps wants to be an angel or a hero, because these kinds of people are always needed, you can visit our website, or you can feel free to use your phone camera to scan the below QR code, and that will take you through to a form where we can contact you and you can volunteer with us. I think if there is a third wave coming, there's a good chance that CSO Cape Town will need help. So that's the situation in Cape Town, Rabbi, and I thank you for having me here.
Loren, thank you. And we join you in paying tribute to those unbelievable heroes on your team. I saw myself personally, their dedication. They're exposing themselves to risk each and every single day, and they do it with selfless inspiration. So please convey to all of them that our community is deeply grateful, and may God continue to bless and protect them and make all of you successful in your holy work that you are doing for him. So God bless you, and thank you, Loren, so much for that update and for paying tribute to your team, which is so appropriate. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Great. I'd like to ask David Unterslak to join us now. David is from KZN, and David has been leading up the CSO medical activities in KZN for Umhlanga and Durban for the community there. And you know, we want to thank you, David, for your time today. And if you can maybe just start by giving us an update of the situation in the community. And also, David, how are you feeling? Because I know that you've been in the front lines of this as CSO Medical, and you contracted COVID as a result of your work. So how are you feeling, David?
Hi, Rabbi. Thank you for having me here. Yeah, my recovery is a story, and my personal experience is something I'll touch on a bit later with your permission. I would just like to start off by maybe just giving an overview of where we are in KZN as a whole, and where we started and where we've got to. So to start off with, in March, when COVID reached KZN, I have to thank our leadership under the President Jeremy Droyman and Vice President Sue Abro and the whole executive of the SAJBD KZN that covers the whole of KZN, with their vision and very early intervention in setting up the SAJBD KZN CMT, which works very closely with CSO in Durban, but we decided strategically to keep the organization separately. And realizing we had no Hatsola or medical support team in KZN, unlike the other provinces, I immediately reached out to Hatsola and arranged for KZN to adopt their wellness program, which ultimately saved lives in the province. I also made contact with Dr. Cams Govender and Dr. Richard Friedland, knowing that their support and advice would be essential to KZN getting through this. Before the wave hit, our CMT, comprising of myself, Liesl Patterson, Mike Elper, CSO, and Chantel Kroot, established the Durban Jewish Club as a quarantine living facility for the staff working in our Jewish facilities looking after our most vulnerable, together with 2 other quarantine facilities for staff returning from leave to be isolated for 14 days. This continued from early April all the way through until September, definitely saving valuable lives in the community. During the first wave, we monitored 42 people, and unfortunately, the community lost 5 people to COVID in that period. The CMT also arranged for the Holocaust Center to be used as a refreshment and rest zone for SAPS, city police, and volunteers looking after the homeless in and around the Jewish Club. We also provided funding and coordinated with the eThekwini municipality and local NGOs the feeding of 1,500 homeless people 2 meals a day for the months of August and September, which equated to over 180,000 meals being served and provided by this incredible community. We also distributed over 70 kosher food packs and meals to our community members, either those in need or in hospital or sick at home. When the second wave came, the vision of Hatsola to create a national group in preparation for both Raize and the holiday seasons was absolutely incredible. And for this, I really would like to thank Hatsola, in particular, Uriel, Danny, and Ryan, for all their support, logistics, and advice. No sooner had the protocols been implemented and the calls and messages were being received. From the 5th of December until the 28th of December, the KZN team delivered wellness kits to 27 either Raize students or holiday makers, together with home-cooked muffins, Shabbos meals, and unfortunately also had to arrange transportation to hospital for some of the visitors from out of town. In KZN, we've monitored 158 community members with 14 hospitalizations and unfortunately a further 8 deaths. We also delivered oxygen, medical and oxygen concentrators to people either being treated at home or once released from hospital, and when requested, arranged wellness monitoring and hospitalization for non-community members. For the above, I'd really like to thank at this stage the Jackamar Trust, Victor Dates Foundation, Yad Mordechai Trust, and other private donors, both local and international, without whose funding the above would not have been possible. In regard to my personal experience, having had spent 9 months on a daily basis dealing with COVID and sick people, I really thought I understood COVID and the symptoms. And yet, when I got sick, I had none of the common symptoms. No headache, no cough, no temperature, no loss of taste or smell. And it really all started with what I just thought was laryngitis, just the loss of a voice. In 2 days, I deteriorated with breathing difficulties and low oxygen levels, and once arranged to be tested and tested positive, I was actually admitted to hospital the same day. By the time I got to the hospital, the bottom 3/4 of both my lungs were badly infected. I was in hospital for 11 days, and on the day of my release, I arranged for Cheryl to have bloods and x-rays at the hospital, with the outcome that she was admitted and I went home. I've now been home for a week, and thank God Cheryl's home with me, and we're far, far, far on the way to recovery with a long distance still to go. I would just like to share that although I spent December running around and most probably saw 18 COVID positive people, I was always very careful, masks, hazmat suits, and all the precautions. I think I was actually infected at home in what I thought was a safe zone, either with a returning COVID monitoring kit or just simply a delivery. And the advice and just message I'd really like to give is if anyone feels ill, any symptoms, take them seriously, get registered on the wellness program and arrange for early treatment. I've seen and experienced the benefits of it. I would like to end up by thanking Dr. Richard Friedland and his Netcare team at St. Augustine's Hospital for the way Cheryl and I were treated. And thank you and all the good you've done in getting a message out there of the seriousness of COVID and that people just take it serious. It's really, really a sneaky little disease.
David, thank you. And, I just want to wish you and Cheryl a continued refuah shlema. I think that your work throughout the last 9-10 months has been absolutely heroic. You've been on the front lines, exposing yourself to risk. And, and we can hear in your breath that you still are recovering. And our prayers are with you and with Cheryl. And we just pay tribute to you for your heroic bravery through the struggle, and for your chesed, the kindness, and indeed of the whole community rallying together to save lives and to look after people. So Yeshar Koach, well done, and may God bless you both with continued healing and in the merit of your incredible heroism. May Hashem bless us all. Thank you, David, for coming on this afternoon. I know it hasn't been easy, and we appreciate you making that extra effort to come and to speak and to address the community today.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Sure. Thank you so much. It's so inspiring to talk to heroes across our community, and now I would like to introduce another hero in our community, leading a heroic organization. And so we've been in Cape Town and Durban this afternoon, and now we come to Johannesburg and ask Saul Tomson, the CEO of the Chevra Kaddish of Johannesburg, to share with us some of what is happening. I know it's indeed a heroic organization involved in so many things. And Saul, thank you for your time. And I think that's, a place to start, is that sometimes, obviously we know the Chevra Kadisha is involved in burial, as we know, that's the name of the Holy Society. But the work that you and your organization do is holy work, which covers many areas. And, so perhaps we can just start there, Saul, if you'll just share with us a little bit of the overview of what you do.
Sure. Thank you, Rabbi. And thank you for having me here today, and to the esteemed panelists. Really a pleasure to speak with, everybody who's doing such amazing work at this time. And yeah, I think the heroic work at the Chev really is done by the staff. We have a complement of nearly 1,000 people working across the Chev group. And each and every single one of them, in whatever aspect of the Chev's work they're doing, are incredible heroes. Many of them in the face of danger, 12-hour shifts in full PPE throughout the day and night. It's really difficult and challenging work, and I really want to pay tribute to them and their unconditional care and compassion for the people that we look after. And I think you're correct. There may be an assumption, and certainly maybe for people who've been out of the country for a while, that still associate the Chev with burial. And it is a part of our work that we're very proud of, and it really is a part that talks to the compassion and the care that we and the professionalism that we approach everything that we do with. But today the Chev is 95%, more than 95% dealing with the living. 95% of our people, 95% of our financial resources are really directed towards the living. And I think that's something that's quite remarkable about this organization and this community. And you won't find a model like this anywhere else in the world. So maybe from a high level perspective, there's really three aspects to divide the Chev's work. The first is our facilities. That's the aged facilities, the facilities for people living with disabilities, and of course, those that look after children. Altogether, we have nearly 1,000 residents across all of our facilities, and that's one aspect of the work that we do. The second aspect is, of course, the financial and social work that we offer community members. It's quite an extensive array of services, and that reaches several thousand people per year. And that's I think, kind of well known in Joburg, certainly. And the third, of course, you mentioned, is the burial side of the Chev. And the burial, I think, has been around since 1888, and again is at the core of what we do. And I think, unfortunately, at this time, has been very central to our work. On a high level, the Chev has a 300 million rand budget, of which 200 million comes from donations every year. So it's 70% donor funded. And often, people ask me how do those numbers stack up? And I think what's probably unique is the reach of the organization, being that we have nearly 11,000 beneficiaries across all of those services. And the second thing is the length of time that we're engaged with a community member. An average time in Arcadia might be 10 years. In the aged homes, similar. Somebody could get financial support from the organization for 20 years. So I think that's quite unique, and that's generally how the organization is made up.
I think, those three divisions during COVID, since really February and March, have really must have had to adapt completely. I mean, right across all of that, and just thinking of the homes, the sense of vulnerability. And maybe you could just share with us, how has the Chevra Kadisha coped through all of this time?
Sure. I think, if you look at the perfect storm, you would look at all aspects of your work, and all of them would need to be affected. And I think COVID really has presented us with that kind of black swan event. Certainly in the aged homes, it's the epicenter of risk. We know that from all over the world. I think if you look at Spain, nearly 60% of the deaths in Spain came from long-term care facilities, and other countries not too dissimilar. And so, it was really, from a medical perspective, the heart of the risk. And we had to locked down very early on, the 13th of March. In fact, our facilities have all been locked down since the 13th of March. Nobody's left, and nobody, aside from essential staff, have come in. And one of the key aspects, I guess, to protecting the elderly and the vulnerable, of which, it's the vast majority of our residents, has been these protective bubbles that we've encapsulated them in. And that access is not just to the general public, it's also to the staff and to residents in other areas that the most vulnerable can't get are not accessed by general staff, and only those who need to work there. And then I guess, the protocols and the policies have been crucial in protecting the elderly. Certainly difficult. They've been in full PPE since early March, as I mentioned, often 12-hour shifts throughout the night, caring for many of our frail. And certainly through the first wave, we had quite a high number of infections, but a very, very low death rate. In fact, it seems like we had our healthiest winter in our homes, which is nothing short of a miracle. Much less infection and much less general sickness, and we're very, very grateful for that. The other thing that was crucial to our defense was the constant testing. We couldn't use the state services. We needed rapid responses, and so we did private testing, which obviously came at quite a big expense, and we did several thousand tests, and that helped us to implement policies and to isolate and to segregate those that were ill. And of course, then we had to increase our supply of nurses and of cleaners, and even we hired more doctors. And so we could manage each of the facilities and each of the wards in the facilities very, very separately and prevent, this real catastrophe. So that was the medical risk in the homes. The secondary risk from a COVID perspective is the economic collapse that we've seen in the country. And that talks to the second part of what the GEV does, which is financial assistance to community members. And so whilst we were grateful, from the early days with the lockdown, from a health point of view, obviously from looking at our assistance to community members, many of those we help were really, in desperate need of funding. And we saw since May until the end of January, we've taken on 377 new financial assistance clients, new welfare families. And the nature of those families have changed. We're seeing a younger demographic. We're seeing lots of single moms from the beauty industry or from the travel industry. If we try to work out what the implication of 377 new clients is. And if we assisting them with an average grant of 8,000 Rand over a period of 6 months, and in many instances, our assistance goes for longer, over that period, that alone is just 18 million Rand worth of financial support to the new clients. So I think the financial stress has been significant on the community. Our caseload has increased dramatically, and we're doing this all and trying to maintain the high levels of governance and make sure that every case is looked at with kindness, compassion and care, but also with proper diligence. And then the social services side, again, has been, we've seen quite a big increase in mental health and abuse issues in the community. We've got a 24-hour helpline with social workers that have seen quite a significant increase in demand, and our bereavement counseling, unfortunately, sadly, has gone up too. And then the last aspect, as you mentioned, is the burial. We saw a massive increase in burials last July, and then this past December and January, looking at 40% increase, in January over 100% increase in community deaths. And that means our heroes at the cemetery are working around the clock, sometimes many teams up through the night, collecting bodies at risk to themselves, and trying to do it all with the professionalism, and the kindness and the compassion, and making sure we bury everybody as quickly as possible as we mandated to do. So all three aspects have really been pushed to the limit. And then, of course, our fundraising, which is 70% of our income, is reliant on an economy, and that's been under pressure as well. So I think it has been a black swan event. We can say it's affected us in every way, and it's been a real stress and challenge for us.
That's amazing. And, thank God. And, through your leadership, and you have an outstanding board and outstanding staff, but through your leadership as CEO, I think, the organization has really done the community proud in adapting. And I thought maybe just to close our discussion, what I've been so inspired by is this sense of also innovation that has come out of the Chev during this time. And the thing, maybe we can, the thing for me that captured the hearts of so many people, and I was actually being interviewed on a webinar recently from in New York, and they'd heard about it all over the world, is the Chev Minyan, that has been saying Kaddish for people who can't, and doing even baby namings, and it's really captured people. So from the crisis was born something really special of the bond between the people in Sandringham Gardens, being that minyan when people can't daven. At the moment, we still can't daven. We're waiting, for the president to lift regulations, and I think that captured the people's hearts. So maybe if there's anything else you want to just share with us as we wrap up our discussion today in terms of innovation, of like, blessings that have come from this time of crisis.
Thanks, Rabbi. I think, this has really forced a lot of creativity in everything that we do. Certainly the minyan you mentioned, and you played an instrumental role early on in discussing that with Rabbi Fox. And I think it's profound, not only that it's met such a huge need in the community, and that, people stayed home to protect the elderly, and in turn the elderly could continue with their minyan and protect and pray for the community, but it actually ensured the uninterrupted chain of minyanim that this country's had for who knows how long. And I think that's something that we're all proud of, that a Torah was taken out with a minyan throughout this entire time at Sandringham Gardens, these 10 vulnerable people, and that yet they with courage came and made a minyan every day. So that was one. I think, our medical advisory committee, which is chaired by one of our board members who's well known now, Richard Friedland, that was actually established several months before COVID hit, and it was an absolute divine blessing because our policies were guided early on. We launched our first emergency relief fund, and our donors have been magnificent, often despite economic hardships, digging deep to help and make sure that we had the funding to do all these things at this time. The Chev's never really done emergency campaigning before, and that was a first for us. We allocated some young MBA students to research, and I think the lag time that South Africa had allowed us to see the best practice in many of the first world countries in terms of nursing facilities. And so many of our protocols, and our early lockdown happened before the president first spoke. It was really gleaned from that research and the knowledge that we had to create, separate bubbles. And there's just been nice, innovative stories. We've implemented digital visits with our residents. We've had nearly 2,000 electronic visits over Skype and WhatsApp. And now, interestingly, we are certain that our residents and their families from overseas are having more frequent contact with each other than they did prior to COVID. So we're seeing more access and more contact. We started this volunteering service where elderly people in the community who were lonely or needed assistance with simple chores could reach out, and we paired them with a volunteer in the community, a younger person who could assist with those chores. And those partnerships have really been flourishing. And now more recently, just the tragedy of people not being able to attend funerals has been really difficult for our team to see. And so we've launched this funeral streaming service. And now we can see that many thousands of people now are logging on to virtually attend funerals and give compassion to the mourners. And I guess the last thing I wanted to say is, and this really isn't widely known in the community, but this came out of a concern that Hatzola was finding, that people without medical aid could not get adequate care in state hospitals. And as a result, the Chev's launched a COVID positive community ward, where those who are unable to get a bed in a public healthcare system or are discharged too early and are in severe risk, that we can admit them into our facilities, use all of our resources which are geared towards treating COVID positive, we call them residents, but I guess they're now patients. And we've seen already in a week or two that there's no doubt that certain lives have been saved because they had somewhere to go and they had someone to nurture and care for them. So I guess that spirit of innovation really has been, you've really seen it save lives at this time, and that's rewarding.
Okay, thank you, Saul, for making the time this afternoon. And really, Chevra Kadisha is, as its name says, it's the holy society, an organization dedicated to holy work of helping people. And Saul, thank you so much for your heroic work as a CEO and for your entire organization and your board. May God continue to bless you with much success in helping so many people that you do. Thank you so much.
Rabbi. Thank you.
Now I'm so excited to talk to a very good friend of mine, Bishop Malusi Mpumlwana, who's joining us. Bishop Malusi is in fact the Secretary General of the South African Council of Churches, which is the largest umbrella Christian organization in the country. The bishop and I are involved in lots of work together, and he has been absolutely crucial in stewarding the Christian community in our country through this very difficult time. The thing that I enjoy most about you, Bishop, is that no matter how tough the situation is, you know, whenever I talk to you, there's always a smile and a deep laugh, which lifts my spirits. So, Bishop, welcome to this platform of the Jewish community. We are so honored to have you with us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rabbi. You're so generous. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks for having me.
Also, I should tell everybody
and my greetings to the community.
Thank you, Bishop. And I just wanted to tell everybody, you know, Bishop, just about 2 weeks ago, you addressed all the rabbis in the community. So I think it was the first time that the General Secretary of the South African Council of Churches addressed all the rabbis in South Africa. So we're offering you, you know, perhaps what would be to offer you ordination to join the ranks of our rabbinate in an honorary capacity, but
without an effort. Without
yes.
an effort.
Exactly, without the effort for the thing. Exactly. So Bishop, on a serious note, I know that this time, you know, over the last year, we've all seen so much human suffering. And, you know, as the South African Council of Churches, which, you know, holds together all of the, you know, the biggest churches in our country, I'm sure this has been a very difficult time from an emotional, spiritual point of view. Perhaps, is there something, you know, but you can just share with our community what the churches have been going through over this time? I mean, it's a sweeping question, but is there something that, you know, stands out for you, Bishop?
Thank you very much for having me. Maybe, you know, just to get a sense of what the Council of Churches is sort of, what is it made up of, so that we have a sense that it's not all the churches in South Africa. But, you know, it's all these, what we call the mainline churches, that really, because it started as a South African chapter of the World Council of Churches, and therefore, those churches that also exist in other parts of the world would be the churches that were the original churches of the Council of Churches, your Methodist Church, Anglican, Presbyterian, and so on. And then later, the Roman Catholic Church joined the Council of Churches, which was not there before. And then, of course, the Dutch Reformed Church, and all these churches are there. But then it was then broadened to include bloc affiliates of what is called the Evangelical Alliance, which is made up of the charismatic churches, sometimes single pastor churches, and the Pentecostal churches, those churches that are not in the old tradition, but they are organized in the Evangelical Alliance, the largest of which might be what is called the Apostolic Faith Mission, which in its own right also is a member of the Council of Churches without the bloc affiliation. And then we have what is called the Council of African Independent Churches. These are more the indigenous you know, churches, many of them very local, but they have a structure that's across all the provinces. Of course, it does not include the largest, called the Zion Christian Church of Moriah. That is not part of this, but it's a fairly substantial grouping of indigenous churches. Then we have what is called the International Fellowship of Christian Churches, Federation of Christian Churches, that's led by Pastor Ray Macaulay. That includes the Grace Bible churches and churches like those. Now, of course, even there is one that is affiliated in its own right called the Grace Bible Church of Bishop Musa Son, who you're familiar with, Chief Rabbi. So that's sort of what, clearly with this diversity of traditions, what brings us together is not going to be doctrine, because we would fight all day over doctrine. It is more coming together on what we call social justice. And therefore, it is more the things that make for a better society, moral issues, societal issues that bring us together. These are the matters that we believe we can come together without being in conflict with one another. And so that's what the Council of Churches actually does.
And I think also from a South African perspective, I know that Bishop, you and I have worked very closely together in the various interfaith forums, because on those social issues, then that crosses even outside of the Christian community to the Jewish community, Muslim,
Absolutely.
Hindu communities. And for me, what I find so inspiring about South Africa is the warmth of the relationships across the religious divides. I think in a certain sense, we've got a lot to teach the world of how religious leaders from different faith communities in this country actually work together.
Chief Rabbi, I don't know, I may have told you this before, but in 1985, when there was that big march, on Paulsmoor, I had on my right arm a Jewish rabbi, and I regret that I cannot remember his name. And on my left, I had the then president of the Muslim Judicial Council, Sheikh Habir. And we were marching together until, of course, the police came and dispersed us all. Some got arrested, others didn't.
Yes, and I know since then we marched on lots of things also. I remember at the time when we were marching against state capture, which, God blessed us to be successful in that struggle. And it was also linking arms across the religions, which has been so, such a positive thing for our country.
Well, there's more to be done. We're now in COVID time.
Yes, but Bishop, if you'll just maybe the churches, and now also with churches being closed, I know that as the Jewish community, we really are missing our synagogues terribly. But and I'm sure within the Christian community, missing your churches, with the government regulations the way that they are at the moment. How is the Christian community as a whole coping in at these times? What is your sense that you're hearing from the church leaders that you've been interacting with?
Well, I think first of all, we should say that our commitment has always been that as much as possible, we should do everything we can to cooperate with the campaign to save lives. But we also want to save livelihoods. So it's always a difficult tension to hold these together. And that our prayers and our time together in worship enables us to have a common messaging, if you like, before God about what's best for our country. And so we do miss the time together in worship. Excuse me, but what we did this time around was to say, look, they've said 2 weeks, we will hold our breath for the 2 weeks. Even though some of us said, look, it's not going to be 2 weeks, they want to stretch it beyond 2 weeks. Well, let's give them the benefit of the doubt. And the 2 weeks happened. And within that 2 weeks, there was that interfaith meeting where we got called, and we thought, this is the time for us to be able to make our case. And I think we were all at one on saying that give us some space to worship together. And that we were all complaining about, how can you say restaurants must meet for 50 and we cannot have worship for 50, even less than that. And so we thought, hey, we've made our point, something is going to happen here. Nothing happened. They still kept us where we are. So as a result of this, the South African Council of Churches convened the church leaders so that we can have an authoritative position. That's what we did. And based on that, we then wrote to government and made essentially 2 points. The first one was that when the vaccine does come, we would like religious ministers of all faiths to be prioritized because they are part of the essential worker. I'm not saying they should take the place of health workers, but definitely if you're going to consider teachers and police, you should consider the religious ministers because they are the ones who have to bury the people that die from COVID, and therefore they are exposed. Even just going to a COVID, death, a bereaved family, you are already exposed, and there's no way you can say I'm not coming. And so there is a need for them to be vaccinated. That's what we said. We believe this is the case for all faiths across the board. Secondly, we said that we believe that really and truly, there cannot be that worship moments are the most infectious moments for people, especially if we are able to take responsibility to ensure that the places of worship are COVID compliant. So we made a case that they should allow at least 50 people indoors and maybe 100 people outdoors, which then can allow for a bigger event if it's well managed on the outside. I also think that there should be a greater emphasis in self-regulation, because government cannot police everybody. And so we have to take responsibility for what works. And if we're making this case, we should be sure that we have created the systems on our side and that we will know what to do with people that are not being compliant, and not wait for the state to do these things for us.
Yes, I think these are two very important points. It was something that I'd mentioned also to the president when we had our meeting of religious leaders with him, because one of the rabbis contacted me just before the meeting to say that, for example, he had a congregant of his about this idea of religious leaders being eligible for the vaccine early on, obviously behind healthcare workers. But like, for example, he said they had a congregant whose wife had passed away from COVID and they were in hospital together, and he'd been in a coma. Now he's coming out and he needs counseling, but he's still COVID positive and you can't go into the ward, and he needs his rabbi to be with him. So the one is the burial and the other is actually giving emotional support to the living. And there's constant risk there, and people need the emotional support. We're seeing, this real problem of emotional distress. And I think the other point that you make is also very important in the context of our synagogues. I'm very proud of our synagogues. Throughout all of the months when we've been open, they've been very disciplined for social distancing, with mask wearing and all of these things. So it is about self-regulation and assuming, because there's a journey ahead with this with COVID, so we need to be able to transition to that. I think it's a very important point you've made.
Yes, but then of course the other thing that we do, we have created a website that's dedicated to COVID. We call it churchinaction.org.za, where we put all kinds of information there that people can use, so that we give the resources that are necessary, as well as sometimes we do animations that people can find useful to make sure that they dramatize what needs to be done. In that way, we provide the kind of support that ordinary people and pastors at the community level will need.
Bishop, thank you so much for your time today, and may God continue to bless you in your holy work that you are doing, to fight this disease across the country. I know the bishop is also the chairman of the Ministerial Advisory Committee, to really galvanize civil society around all of these precautions, and it's something which is so important. And I think that one of the greatest strengths of South Africa is the fact that there are people of faith right across the length and breadth of this country. And Bishop, it's always an honor to work with you on these interfaith initiatives to make our country a better place. And I want to thank you personally for your friendship, and also for your friendship to our community, and for joining us today to address our community and addressing the rabbis 2 weeks ago. Thank you so much, Bishop.
Thank you. It's been a great privilege. Thank you so very much for having me, and have a blessed time.
Blessings to you. God bless you, and thank you. Okay, and today, as we now move to the final discussion on our agenda today, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome Yaakov Katz, the editor-in-chief of the Jerusalem Post. Yaakov is also a dear friend, and is leading arguably the most important Jewish platform in the world, both in Israel and across the globe. And Yaakov, thank you so much for your time today, and welcome, to the South African Jewish community.
Rabbi, it's always a pleasure to be with you, to be with your amazing community. Nowadays, in the Israeli press, we're hearing too much about the South African variant and the mutation.
Yes.
But we forget that there's this amazing Jewish community in South Africa, and under your leadership. So thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you so much. So maybe we could even, start there in terms of, I think Israel has captured the imagination of the world. in this rollout of vaccines, and it's something which it's really standing head and shoulders above any country in the world. I mean, what is the atmosphere like in the sense of this vaccine rollout? And then at the same time, there's the high infection rate. And I read somewhere, I think it was in the Jerusalem Post, it must have been, obviously, if it was something of worth. And that is Israel's had more lockdown almost than any other country in the world. So you've kind of got these two sides of the story. What's the atmosphere in the country at the moment? This, between these two things.
I wish I could say the atmosphere is positive. Sadly, it's not. On the one hand, as you correctly said, there's the good story of the vaccines. I personally, my wife and I, even our 17-year-old daughter, right, have all been vaccinated with both Pfizer vaccines. Baruch Hashem, thank God. We're not yet sure what it does, right? Because nowadays you hear all these stories of how it's not exactly clear what it protects you from, but I mean, it's probably better than the alternative. And Israel has vaccinated now 30% of its population, which is incredible, right? And I think that's a testament to the amazing the health system, in the sense of how it's a community-based system, and you have clinics throughout the community, and the ability to quickly roll out the vaccines, the government's ability to get the vaccines in big numbers. This is definitely a positive story. On the other side, though, and you probably saw this today, Rabbi, was this mass funeral taking place in Jerusalem. A 99-year-old rabbi, ultra-Orthodox rabbi, passed away, and you had thousands of people who took to the streets, and then were surprised why the ultra-Orthodox, and I don't want to demonize any single community or sector of society, but they constitute today about 40% of infections, when really they're only about 10% of the population. You have the same problem with some of the Israeli Arabs, who are 20% of Israel's 9 million people, and also are constituting 30 to 40% of infections. So the lack of obedience to the coronavirus regulations is causing some serious problems here in Israel, and that's adding to the continued infection rate. And as we speak, as a matter of fact, the cabinet is convening to extend the lockdown by at least another week, to extend the closure of our airport for at least maybe even 2 weeks, they're talking about, right? So it's kind of contradictory that we have amazing vaccination happening, but at the same time, we're not able to get the numbers down.
Yeah, so it's and then throw into the mix of all of this, and this is what always makes Israel such an interesting place. There's never a dull moment, because you've got all of this going on and an election around the corner. And sure. how does vaccines, COVID, all of this play into the election, and how are things unfolding in that space?
Well, if it was up to Prime Minister Netanyahu, all we would talk about all day are the vaccinations, right? He's very much taking credit for it. I think he deserves a significant amount of the credit to his ability to make that deal with Pfizer, that they would look at Israel as like a kind of a test tube of sorts, or like a laboratory. We're all lab rats to an extent here in Israel. They're looking, and by the way, that's because of we're a small country, relatively small population, relatively young population, and the fact that we have a joint federal, I would call it, database that all of the health funds pour all the information into, and it's very easy to access that, which is, for example, if you look at what's happening in the United States right now, one of their problems with rolling out vaccines is that everything's on a state level, a local level. There isn't a federal system, and thankfully we have that here. So he would want us talking about the vaccines, and that is why ultimately he wanted originally the elections to be in April, May, when he knew that probably 50% of the population would be vaccinated, and we'd be the economic crisis would have been over, possibly businesses would have reopened. That hasn't happened. So he's trying to move the narrative away from the lockdown and the economic impact that's happening, which is dire, right, to the vaccinations. There are his other contenders in the election, Gideon Sa'ar, Naftali Bennett, Yair Lapid, and others are trying to make it more about his failings throughout the management of the coronavirus crisis. And it's all kind of a perfect storm. I think, like you said, Rabbi, right, we have this crisis, we have the election around the corner. None of this is good. And by the way, what this does ultimately, and I think you'll understand this probably very well, is this erodes faith and trust in our government between different parts of society. This is the big problem, right? What this pandemic shows You have your stronger parts of society. You have your weaker parts of society. You have people who have more money, people who have less money. That's across the world, right? You know that, I know that. But what you're seeing now is the division is growing. The division is growing between the secular and the religious, between the ultra-Orthodox and the rest of society, right? When they violate the regulations and my kids stay home from school, but their kids go to school, my kids want to know why they can't go to school, right? This is not, and what that does is it drives a wedge between us. We need to come together, not come apart. And sadly, this is becoming too much of what Israel's story is. And this is coming after 2 years of elections. So we've had mudslinging going on a political level. Now we have mudslinging going on a social level. It's destructive. This is terrible for Israel in the long run. And that has me concerned about what are we going to look like as a society going forward.
Yes. So, and I think this struggle of unity and division, it's something Israel is struggling with at the moment. But if we look at the United States, it's also really at the moment been struggling from a point of view of divisiveness. And now that was the theme, obviously, of the inauguration speech of President Joe Biden. The Biden administration, and I think this also, we're looking at what's going on in Israel. There's so much going on, but now the Biden administration is bringing a whole new slant and emphasis and policy direction, possibly to global affairs, which obviously is going to affect Israel, going to be very different from the Trump administration. And how do you see that playing out? Do you think Joe Biden's administration can still be good for Israel? How do you see this playing out?
Well, I mean, I think, it's a very good question. I think that first of all, we need to redefine what does it mean to be good for Israel. I think that we all got used to, we read not long ago, just a few Shabbatot ago, about Yosef's dreams, right? And one of those dreams, Rabbi, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, was about the skinny cows and the fat cows, right? And referred to the good years that are going to come for Egypt and the bad years that are going to come for Egypt, right? With the famine. We had those good years now to some extent under President Trump, where Israel was showered with benefits and gifts and recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital, the withdrawal from the Iran deal, the recognition of the Golan Heights, the announcement by Secretary of State Mike Pompeo that settlements in the West Bank and Judea and Samaria are not necessarily illegal, according to the U.S., and other things that happen along the way. But what we're seeing now is that pendulum has swung back, and it swung back to the way things always were, right? Under all previous administrations, whether Republican or Democrat. Trump was not the normal. Trump was the abnormal. Now, we have to, as a country, understand that we're back to the way things used to be. And we have to get used to that. And that will require us to adapt and to shift our understanding of the way things can be and what we can do within this system that's now presenting itself under the Biden administration. So I think that they definitely are pro-Israel. I think that Biden has strong sentiments to Israel. Biden has said that he's a Zionist, right? So Biden cares deeply and he has bona fide pro-Israel credentials. I don't think we can question that. But do they have a problem with construction in West Bank settlements? Yes. Do they want to go back into a deal with Iran? Yes. Now, the question that we have to ask is, do we want to fight with them or do we want to try to work together with them? And I think that at this stage that we're in right now, our emphasis or our focus should be on how can we work together with the Biden administration. I can't tell you, though, that I'm not concerned, right? As an example, I tweeted earlier today how we're now 12 days into this administration and Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Biden have yet to have a phone call. And I look back at the previous two presidents. In 2009, on the day of inauguration, President Obama called Ehud Olmert, who was then our prime minister, as well as Mahmoud Abbas, the Palestinian Authority president. In 2017, after Donald Trump became president, it was on a Friday, it was inauguration. On Sunday, 2 days later, he spoke with Prime Minister Netanyahu. We're now 12 days in, and Biden and Bibi have yet to speak. That has me a little concerned because, what message are we supposed to take away from this? Is it that they're telling us, listen, you're just not that important right now? We have domestic issues, Corona, unity, whatever it might be. And that's fine. That's legitimate. But is it maybe something deeper that we have a problem with you? and we want to put you in your place. And if that's the case, then we have to be sensitive to this, right? We need America is one of Israel's most important ally. That alliance is critical for Israel's projection of its own power. We have to work hard to retain that. And what we've seen sadly over the years has been an erosion of Israeli relations with the Democratic Party. Israel has a lot of work to make up for what's happened. I hope we don't ruin that so early on within the Biden administration. I hope and pray that we are sensitive to what's happening.
Yes, and I think maybe just the last point on all of this would be really the fact that maybe in a certain sense the balance of power in the Middle East has shifted, in the sense that with the Abraham Accords, Israel has now got allies right across the Middle East, and that's maybe the dawn of a new era in which there is really a sense of hope. I think that that growth of peace is something which is so inspiring, and maybe that's also like a sort of a light in all of this turbulence.
I think so, 100%. By the way, I was in Dubai now about a month and a half ago, and to me it was incredible as an Israeli to be sitting in meetings with Emiratis, people who just months ago were people who we didn't have formal relations with. We struck a partnership, the Jerusalem Post, the newspaper I'm the editor of, together with the Khalij Times, an Emirati newspaper. This is a new era for the Middle East and for the world, right? This is the basically come true, the materialization of what we have always envisioned and dreamt of, that Israel, a Jewish state, can be accepted here in the Middle East. This is what we've always wanted. But I also think that you're right that what the Abraham Accords does do is it shows the administration in America, as well as the Europeans, that Israel does not stand alone against Iran. You have Israel, you have the Saudis, you have the Emiratis, you have the Bahrainis. Everybody here is together, and we're all concerned, and this is a united front. And I think that they can't ignore that, and they have to take this into consideration in whatever they decide to do going forward.
Yaakov, thank you so much for joining in today. Look forward to future discussions. There's so much to cover, and never a dull moment in Israel, and you're right on top of it. So thank you so much for joining. Thank you for your ongoing friendship, which means so much to me and to our community. And
thank you for your leadership, Rabbi Goldstein. Thank you.
Thank you, and look forward to further chats. Thanks for joining in today. Friends, we've had really a packed time today, really talking to so many heroes and so many different people doing unbelievable work across our community, across our country, and across our world. I just wanted to end with the following thought about the importance of unity, because it actually relates to this week's portion. And we know that America, United States, President Biden, we just heard from Yaakov Katz, the struggles in Israel around the issue of unity. And this week's Parashat Yitro, deals with the issue of unity, because the Jewish people come to encamp around the Mount Sinai to receive the Torah from God. And the verse says, Vayichan ha'am neged ahar, and the nation encamped opposite the mountain. And it uses the verb in the singular. And our sages say the most memorable words, which I think can guide us as a community in so many ways. And it says, Ki ish echad belev echad, like one person with one heart. And that is the definition of unity. It doesn't say like one person with one mind, because we know that as a Jewish community, there are going to be lots of different opinions. We don't always agree on things, for sure not. But it doesn't matter. Even if we disagree on things, one person with one heart. One heart means that we love each other, that we care for one another. That is the root of unity. Unity is not about agreeing on everything. Unity is even when we disagree, that we still love each other. And that unity is not just a noun, it is a verb. It's not just a concept, it's a verb meaning how we act, how we treat one another. That we need that here in our own community and around the world, the way that we treat one another really goes to the heart of what unity is all about. It's treating one another with respect, with love, with dignity. And that ultimately is what it expresses. Unity is not uniformity. It's not saying that we're all the same. Ki ish echad belev echad, one person with one heart. And what our sages point out is, before we could receive the Torah at Mount Sinai, which is what this week's Parashat Yitro is all about, we had to be unified, because it was a preparation for it, that God, to bring God's Torah into this world, his values, his vision into our lives and into our world. We have to be united. We have to embrace that with common respect and mutual dignity. Then we are a platform to bring his values into this world. Ki ish echad b'lev echad, one person with one heart. Thank you so much for joining today. Look forward to being with you again next week. At the same time at 5 o'clock, as we continue to have these conversations as a community to explore our world together. God bless you, and thank you all, and thank you to our incredible panelists for inspiring us with their heroism and their insights today. Thank you all so much.